Howdy, fellas.
Hey
Hey,
fellas, how's
hey.
it going? Long time no see.
Wow.
I know it's been forever. Seems like. Hey guys, how are y'all doing tonight? Welcome back to another Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. So fun to have you guys on here. And you guys, we already have over 100 people on this stream, and we just barely finished up the intro. It's just so awesome. I love that intro every single time. It's
Mhm.
just so cool.
Yeah.
Looking forward to a great chat tonight. So we had a really good time this past weekend up in Wisconsin. I've never been to Wisconsin before. Have you guys been to Wisconsin before?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
you
drive there
guys.
just for the cheese curds.
I'm telling you, it was about worth it. Would have been almost worth it for sure. They were so good.
Yeah.
Um, but we were able to go to the Beak Meet up in Wausau, Wisconsin. I think I said that right.
Wow, good job,
Wausau
Bruce.
with a Yankee slash Southern accent right there.
Nailed it. Good job.
And what'd y'all think of that conference up there?
Man, I tell you, I've kind of gotten behind the pulpit quite a few times over the last couple years to say that the old rusty, dusty way of putting on conferences and big bee gatherings just it's evident it's not working. And a lot of folks are seeing that and understanding that and have taken the opportunity to do something that's meaningful, impactful, and doing things that are actually bringing people to a location to learn about bees, to fellowship with each other, to build the community, to get great deals on products. And the whole team here at the Beak Meet 2024 in Wisconsin, they did just that. They definitely took a page out of the handbook of success, and they brought YouTube beekeepers in. They did bring some of the collegiate beekeeper approach in there. They brought the vendors. They brought the stream team. And what you had is such a beautiful crowd of people who were excited to be there, excited to see each other, and what a sense of family that continues to grow and bloom all over the country when folks put on conferences in that manner. So for me, you feel like you're at home every time you go to a conference like that
Mhm.
because there are so many folks. Although you may not have ever shook their hand or looked them in the eye in person,
Mhm.
you've known them or seen them or met them via social media or YouTube, and just what a sense of camaraderie and family that actually builds. It's part of a bigger movement that is goes past any just single conference. It is growing and blooming, and that's the most beautiful thing. Is it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. More states are picking up on that, and they're acting on that, and folks are voting with their wallet, and they're showing up in a big way.
Absolutely, Brian. What was your takeaway?
No, I mean, it was awesome. I mean, the hospitality of everyone up there was just top notch. I mean, it just the crew. Everybody that was a part of that conference, they did an amazing job. From when we walked in there to when everything ended, it was a good time. Good vibes throughout the entire place, and I tell you, the place was packed too. You know, I mean, I was talking to somebody that had been to conferences there before, and I understand it's been a couple years. That said they never saw that main room that full, and they had the main room full plus all the other breakout sessions on the other floors full also. So they did a heck of a good job on that thing.
Yeah, I think kudos to the staff and especially Mike. I think was kind of in charge of that thing, but they just did an incredible job. Um, for the whole thing, and it was like you said, it was packed. Everything was well organized. It just
Mhm.
was a really good conference, and I haven't been to the only other conference I've really been to is the B Expo and Cayman's conference. The last 3 years I've been to that, and I that's my only experience with the conferences, and so I was so grateful to be invited to this and be able to come up and participate and get to know so many people. But one thing I've noticed, it's just you walk in and you feel like family. You just walk in there and it's like, I'm so far away from home up there, in, the middle of Wisconsin, and you walk in and you feel like you already know people. Even if you don't, people come up and introduce themselves to you and you get to know them. And a lot of people already kind of I was familiar with from their names. They're communicating with them before getting there. Seeing their names in the comments. There's so many cool people that came up, introduced themselves to us, and man, just what a neat vibe there. And I will say one more thing about the food in Wisconsin. I give it a thumbs up.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think I'm still full from the breakfast there. What a great place to, out of all the places, when the folks there first reached out to invite me to come speak, and we talked about maybe let's see about getting the stream team there. I was kind of thinking it's Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin's I've spent time there. It's a beautiful place, but in my mind, it's not exactly what you would think as the epicenter for beekeepers, and I couldn't be more wrong. The amount of folks that hail from that area, but also there were folks that were driving 5, 6, 7 hours just to get there and be a part of that thing. And I think that's what makes those kind of things so special. It's a great area, beautiful country, amazing food, and it just that's one of the funnest things I think about traveling around speaking at different conferences is getting to know the people, getting an idea of the culture, the community. While there are some differences and nuances, everyone still feels like family. I've got to give a shout out to you guys. A lot of the folks who are listening tonight have been to a lot of conferences all across the country. And I don't want to get lost in the weeds on a tit for tat, but I will say that there are some amazing folks throughout the country, and in our own experience, conferences that we have spoke at or have been a part of, like Honey in the Hills in West Virginia. The EMBA put on an amazing conference in Missouri here recently. Now Beak Meet 2024 is now in those ranks, and all these folks are falling within the ranks of the Bee Expo. That's a big deal. There's big change coming to the bee industry, and I'm really excited for the next 5 years. It really ushers in a whole new world, a lot of new opportunities for speakers, content creators, vendors, and what I really enjoyed the most is I had to kind of go back and kind of check some of the footage. I didn't get a chance, unfortunately, to record my presentation, and it's probably better yet because it felt like the right time to get into and kind of share the genesis story of us and how we got from living in the city to the homestead to a farmstead to the farm and the business. And it was, we've talked a little bit. It was a near death experience that kind of changed our family's entire direction. And of course, when I've got Susie in there with me, and our talk is focused on homestead beekeeping, I mean, I was choking up. It was hard for me to keep it together. And Susie, and the beautiful thing is there were so many folks who related to that. Let's be honest, a lot of if you look at your demographics on your beekeeping YouTube channel, unfortunately, 90% of that market is men from the age of 40 to 75 years old. Now, I don't mean unfortunately like it's a problem, but what I noticed and what I'm seeing is at a lot of these talks that we're giving and within these communities, we're seeing a much better ratio of women and men. And I don't mean that in a trying to even some kind of a field. I mean this in we have couples, married couples, and folks who are getting into the mix, who are being a part of this community. And I absolutely love that. When it comes to homesteading and beekeeping, we've said it a million times. Behind every great man is an even better woman. And I give Susie all the credit for the things that we've accomplished and those kind of good ideas. So for me, it's awesome to see so many women up in the forefront making things happen, and for the men to give the respect to them that they deserve is really cool. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it up in Wisconsin for sure. The food, Bruce. I mean, are you still? I feel like we're still in biscuits and gravy, cheese curds, apple fritter French toast.
Cinnamon roll French toast. That's what I got.
You had cinnamon roll French toast. Brian had hash, corned beef hash
plate. Yeah.
I've never experienced anything like that cinnamon roll French toast. My word. Golly, that was so good.
I'm still whipped. I don't know about you guys, but I am just starting
yeah.
to like I'm coming online.
Yeah.
That kind of a drive, it wasn't that bad of a drive. It was like 10 and a half hours. But when you're engaged for that long
Whose
and you're
car were you
driving,
in?
what's
Got
that?
Yeah.
Whose car were you in? Because
What?
Sunday that felt like 20 hours.
Well, Sunday, we'll see if we get into that. That was a horse of a, well, that was a different experience there altogether. But anyways, yeah, what a great time. There is a very serious question that we did not get to answer. And there was a very serious post the morning of the conference that we posted on the stream team where it is, what are the fellas' favorite donuts? And here we are at Dunkin' Donuts. And I don't think the question was actually answered. So, Bruce, if you don't care, before we get started on serious things, let's dig into the things that really matter tonight. What are the stream team's favorite donuts? We'll start with Bruce.
Well, if you're sticking with strictly donuts, I just like a good, just a good. Yeah, I don't like cake donuts, but I like a good yeast donut, either just a like glazed or a chocolate yeast donut. But that can expand out into, we saw some serious stuff at that place where we ate breakfast. We got fritters, we got um, cinnamon rolls. If it can extend out into that, I would definitely have to say, as of now, my new favorite baked good or pastry or whatever you want to call it breakfast meal is the cinnamon roll French toast.
Wow.
And
My arteries
it
are still
wasn't, it
feeling
wasn't,
slow.
it, anyway, so I moved that. But I'd say as far as strictly donuts, I'm just going to go with your basic, glazed yeast type donut or chocolate yeast type donut is my favorite.
Brian, what about you? Favorite
Oh,
donut?
I like a good jelly filled.
Like
You know?
a glazed jelly filled or like a
Yeah.
powdered jelly filled?
I mean, all of the above there. Does it look like I discriminate against which jelly
No, we
filled?
are equal donut opportunists, that's for sure.
Exactly.
I'm gonna go with apple fritter, and I'm a big fan of a good apple
That's good.
fritter, and those fritters that they had up in Wisconsin, holy cow, crunchy on the outside, just kind of just greasy enough, if you could call it that, with the big apple chunks and just a lot of oomph to them. But
Yeah, I mean, we could talk food, and that wasn't the only place that was good. But that was called, I pulled it up. It's called the Truckers Inn Travel Plaza in DeForest, Wisconsin. We ate lunch on the way up after you guys picked me up at the Madison Airport, and we ate breakfast on the way down before you dropped me off. And that place, it's just kind of a trucker stop there. It's been there a while, I think, and it's been serving good food there for a while too, I think. But also, what was the restaurant's name we ate at up in Wausau? That was a good place. It was like
Wausau
a
Mine
miner's.
Company.
the Mine
Wausau
Company,
Mine. That there was some really good food there. And one thing I have to say, because I'm a fan of cheese, is that in Wisconsin, it is true, everything had cheese involved with it pretty much. There was
lots of it.
cheese all over the place, and I love cheese, so it was a good fit for me. I was real
Yeah.
impressed. And on a more serious note too, I would also say, you hear about Southern hospitality, but man, the hospitality of those folks up there was just incredible as well.
Oh
Just the
yeah.
nicest
Absolutely.
people, just felt totally at home.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was what we did this weekend. It was really nice and cool to be able to hang out with you two yahoos, and also Susie was in the mix there hanging out with us. That poor girl, and all the
You got
awesome
off the ride
beekeepers.
at just the right time, Bruce, because it just got silly and slap happy from there on.
Yeah.
We just went, the grown adults just went downhill in a hurry, and we were just
Yeah.
12-year-old kids running around Farm and Fleet, riding on mini bikes, and just
I saw the pictures. Yeah, I do have a video. I try to get some clips of the conference. It's not gonna. If someone watches it who was there and you're not in it. Don't. I mean, I just did the best I could. There's no way to capture anything like that in its entirety, but I did get some clips. I'm gonna try to throw something together. I've started working on it today, so maybe we'll end up with something pretty cool.
Greg,
oh no,
do you have your phone?
yeah,
Show one of those clips in from that store we stopped at. The one
oh
where
my
you had
gosh,
the pitchfork.
oh man, I don't know if I can even pull it up here. I'm gonna try to put a video together. There was just so many. We were absolutely off the chain, Bruce. It's a good thing. If you were there, maybe we would have behaved a little bit. But let's see, Brian, if I could. I'll pull that up here.
We were a good hour in that store just
Hey guys, I promise we're going to talk bees here in just a minute.
We are. Hey, let's see if I can. Let's see if it'll do this thing. Okay. This is for the record. This is probably the absolute worst way to show anything. But let's see if we can do this. And
What is that? We're about to find it. Oh my gosh. That's so crazy.
it's just a whole video of just shenanigans. Shenanigans. But hey, you know what? You can't take everything so seriously, including beekeeping. You know, we're about the beekeeper and the experience and having fun. And boy, we whenever you compare something like farming fleet, apple fritters, and beekeeping all in the same trip. And for right now, we'll even leave the South Chicago on St. Patrick's Day fiasco. We'll leave that story for another time.
Awesome.
Yeah. So,
Well, why don't we just move on into bees a little bit and what's going on in your neck of the woods, a brief summary, and each of you guys' place, and then we'll dive into the topic for tonight. Brian, start off with you. What's going on in your situation with your situation?
Well, ever since I got back, I don't think we have hit 40. We actually had snow, and tonight we're supposed to get like an inch or so. So I haven't done anything because it's been too cold to do anything. So this happens though in Ohio. It's literally every year, at least in this area, around St. Patrick's Day, we get that last kind of front that comes through and says, "Oh, you think it's springtime? Well, here, hang on one second. I've got to show you something." So, after this, then we're going to start the trend where we'll warm up. So, I plan on, I got actually 2 boxes today from Hive Alive. So I plan on next time I get over and the weather's warm enough, I'm going to get them started with their pollen patties and things like that because we're going to start warming. And, I want to make sure that they have all the supplements they need. So here soon I'll get busy, but since we got home and that, it's absolutely nothing up in this part of the country.
Similar story for you, Greg. I know you're busy with other stuff as well besides just the actual bees. I know you got a lot going on with your store and your family.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and in the sense that it's one of those look out the window, it seems nice, but it's not really. The sun's out. We've had winds of probably 40 to 60 miles an hour the last couple of days, which cools things off considerably. All day long today, the bees were hunkered down until about 5:36, and the wind died down just enough. We had a high of about 49-50 today, and of course, they're just out like gangbusters. Fortunately, we've learned to sort of read nature, read the bees, and then act accordingly. And so we've had pollen patties on now for a couple weeks, and it's going to be time to get in there again later this week and freshen those up. And we're going to be on a pollen patty regiment for the next probably month or so, possibly a little bit longer as we get into seeing splits all the way through. But that's the big thing right now is, yeah, they've got a little bit of honey still left in the colonies, but they are ravenously wanting to switch over towards protein. And so we're trying to give them that, not so much that that's going to entice them to ramp up brooding. But last night at the Fairfield County Beekeepers Club, we talked about a lot of these fundamentals of getting your bees off to a good start. But we'll talk about it later throughout tonight's chat, especially when it comes to splits and nukes and on whatever we end up talking about. But with these temperatures going up and down, up and down, up and down, the biggest thing that sets them back is their inability to kind of get out and go forwards for anything. So by having food on the colony, rather than these curves be like this, it just kind of keeps the curves like that. And so it helps them continue to move forward, which is a big deal, especially if you're anticipating an early crop of honey or you're anticipating splitting those colonies out. It's a great move to have pollen patties on, and that's what we're the busiest doing right now is pollen patties. And then Jake's been going out with oxalic acid, and I think we're on our second round. We'll try to get one more round in, and then that's pretty much going to be it. until we get into the thick of the season.
Well, this time of the year is obviously springtime. People are getting their bees ramped up, feeding, whether it be sugar syrup, fondant, pollen patties, or just straight up sugar in the hives, getting ready for this springtime build up and extensive and quick growth. So what can happen though sometimes, I think, and it happens here in the South a lot, is happening here right now, is as the bees build up rapidly in the spring, that swarm tendency kicks in. So I thought we'd take a few minutes tonight and talk about swarms in general, talk about maybe some methods of swarm prevention, uh, philosophies on swarm prevention, if it's even important to prevent swarms, and then just kind of general philosophies on swarms to start off with. I thought we could talk about swarms, splits, and then if we have time, we may talk about queens a little bit. All those things are related, obviously. So Brian, start with you. Kind of for those who may be new to beekeeping, I know a lot of people on here have been keeping bees for a while, but first of all, kind of what do you think about? Maybe you can explain a little bit about what swarms actually are, what causes them in the springtime,
Mm-hmm.
and then what you might do to help prevent those swarms.
Swarms are colonies' natural instinct, reproduction. They will. I always tell brand new beekeepers, your first season it's almost like that happy just roller coaster, and you're cruising along. And then when you overwinter your colonies, that very first like spring just becomes so much fun because you look in there and you see these peanut looking things and all this and that, and then you see swarms in the trees, and it's so much fun that second year. But um, I try. I'm not 100% successful at it, by no means. I always try and time it out so that I can make my splits, so that I can grow my apiary instead of losing bees to the trees. It's like up here and how our weather is, it's difficult sometimes just to time it out. Last 2 years I've been close to where you keep an eye on them, and you watch all the signs. You see, they're getting their drones built up. You watch all the signs. They're building up like mad. They've got all the brood. There's food in there. And I try and time it so that, like, within a day or so, when I see those cells, then what I always try and do is move my queen over, so that way it's almost considered, like, if you want to say it's an artificial swarm, so it kind of resets her clock, like, hey, I've swarmed. It tends to work for me. Do you have a baited swarm trap in your yard, Brian? Stan, I do not. But that method tends to work for me as far as like my scale. I'm always like very my splits are I'm not real aggressive in the spring with my splits. There's times where when I would open up some of my colonies, and if I see, oh gosh, 15 plus cells, 20 cells, I know if Greg were to look at that, he's just exactly, that'd be the look on his face, because you're looking at the number of splits you can do. But I just, if I see a lot of cells like that, I may pull an extra off of that and set up a little nuke just to get an extra colony started. But a lot of times I just let those virgins battle royale, let the strongest one, let Mother Nature take its course and let the strongest one win. I've always had luck doing that. This year, I'm not going to play around with queens as much, because I would try and do my splits and then put a mated queen in there. That way I don't have like that hiccup, those couple weeks where, while you're waiting for, the queen to emerge out, and then she's, going to mature a little bit and go on a mating flight and do all that kind of stuff. So you lose that little bit of time there. I would drop in mated queens in the past. This year, we'll see. I do have an order there for some queens from Greg that will cover the colonies that I have. So I could do that, but I don't know. Um, I'm probably the most for those on here. My splits are not that aggressive, so to say. So, but like last year, I think for my colonies, at least that I know of, because there's times where you can do whatever you want to do, and you can try any type of swarm management you want, and a colony is still gonna pump out a swarm. Um, Last year, I think there was only 2 or 3 of my colonies that ended up swarming. So last year, I had pretty decent luck with what I do in my yard. We'll see. So we'll see.
Greg, tell us what your thoughts are on swarms. And I know there are times, I know I saw a comment in here, I think from Sawmill Charlie, about if you see the cells, it's too late. But I think there are times when we can kind of maybe harness that tendency for bees to swarm in our advantage, and maybe talk about your philosophy on swarms and kind of how we can harness their swarming tendency to our advantage as beekeepers.
I absolutely love this topic, and I'm going to try not to get too much mileage out of some of these ideas. But this is one of the presentations that I gave for the folks at the Eastern Missouri Beekeepers Association was indeed swarm management. And if I could back up for just a second, Bruce, to kind of set the tone for my mindset on this, um, there's a specific Proverbs 13:22 that a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. What does that have to do with swarms? I think that there is this design by the creator within all of us to do that, to leave an inheritance, to build something up, to hand that down and to keep moving on and do it over and over and over again. I think it's a beautiful thing that we have as humans, but the bees have this intrinsic uh, design to them that their entire life's purpose is to build up, to leave it for the next generation, and then to go off and do it again over and over and over again. And when a colony has all the things that they need, everything's healthy, everything's moving forward, that's exactly what they do. So with that in mind, I look at things as swarms as beautiful opportunities. One of the first questions I usually ask when we're talking about swarm management is, show of hands. If you and I will run through a scenario in the presentation with photos. If you start to see this, 8 pounds of bees hanging on a branch, or you're inside of a colony and you open it up and you're a little bit late and you go in there and you see 10 or 15 or 20 queen cells, describe that feeling you have right now. Is it anxiety? Is it nervousness? Are you afraid? Are you fearful? Are you excited? Are you giddy? Is there an opportunity? For me, I like to play to the bee's strengths and intentionally use swarming and swarm cells, especially early in the year. And we can't get lost in the weeds about all of that right now. But I love to let the bees get to that point when I'm in a mode of growth and a mode of increase, because we let the bees do as much of that work as we possibly can. But we can cut those cells out. We can move those frames. We can split them out. We can take a colony that's in double or triples that are loaded full of cells, loaded full of bees, and be able to break down 2 or 3 deeps of colonies into 10, 12, 15 splits easily, and have all the resources right there to do it. So for me, I look at swarms and the managing swarms as a way for a beautiful increase and beautiful growth. There's a lot of different ways we can go about doing that. But for me, when I see swarms, that's a huge positive. So in my mind, when it comes to swarms, the problem is the solution. Let the bees do all that work, and then let's talk about making increase with that. And of course, if we're not going into increase mode and you're in more of this, more of a fearful or maybe even asset protection mode, where you're trying to hold these bees back for that honey crop, then that's a whole other mindset. But Bruce, when you talk about swarms and queen cells and things like that, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think a little bit of both. I'm kind of in between the two of you guys. I obviously don't get to my bees as much as I should. I'm sure there are swarms every year. What I like to do is, as far as swarm prevention goes, I think I did a decent job of this year, even though I have had at least a couple, 3 swarms that I'm aware of. But I went in, the bees were building up, I think early February, maybe late January, early February. Maybe late January or early February. And I added a deep of drawn comb. Most of them were either deeps and mediums or double deeps. And the ones that may have been single deeps that were busting at the seams, I just added a deep of drawn comb that I had in between those boxes. I would split them up. Now there is a danger of them, making a new queen above, but if you put that drawn comb, they typically tend to cross that pretty quick. You got to be careful with temperatures too. Obviously, you don't want to split the brood up if there's temperature issues. But if it's mostly honey on top and you put that drawn comb in there, that immediately gives that queen some relief. It gives them it relieves some of that swarm pressure. So if you're trying to have good, strong colonies for production and you want to try and keep them out of the trees, I think that's a good method you can use as the bees begin to build up. Let them build on up into that, maybe that third deep box or second deep box, whatever it is on there. And then you're setting yourself up for some nice splits just a little bit later down the road. Once that queen starts laying up there, here in Alabama, we can, if we have access to mated queens, like I was able to get lucky and find this year, really you can almost split bees at the start of the year because, with a mated queen, they get going. You don't have to worry about the drone situation. And so I think, I think that's kind of what I try to do. As far as if I see a swarm in a tree, if I can catch them, I do. If they're too high, I don't. I happen to have an open air colony. Last time I checked in Slocum that's been there, it was like, I think late January, early February, and when those girls swarmed, and they just stayed up there in the tree. They're sitting up there still. They're growing into an open air colony. And Lisa saw it when she was up there the other night, and it's just pretty neat. I'm just going to watch them this summer. I've had that happen before, and they usually obviously when fall rolls around, they kind of fizzle out and they end up either disappearing or dying out. I'm not sure, but I'm going to watch that thing and see how big it gets and what they do. Is kind of an interesting study. I just couldn't get to them. They were too high, but I've actually caught one swarm confirmed that was just hanging on a limb there in the bee yard. And another one this past time I was down there I think it was right before I came up to the conference. I just set an apomate down. It was almost on the ground. I set an apomate hive right next to it and the bees ran in. And so if they're still in the box when I go back, I'll set them off to the side or move them to a different bee yard. And if not, then oh well, so I don't worry too much about it. I don't panic when I see swarm cells. If I open up a colony and there's like 15 swarm cells in there, it really depends on what I need to do at the time. If I want to make some splits, I may do that. Mm-hmm. I know that you really don't want to, if you got beautiful queen cells, you don't want to tear them down, but every once in a while, I may tear all of them down except one or two, just if I don't need them, if I don't have a place for them, if I'm just in the middle of working bees. And then if they do go ahead and swarm, at least they'll have the ability to make a new queen and possibly may keep them in the box if you create space for them. So there's so many different strategies. And then I think Brian mentioned a really good strategy where you can actually do even if it's a small split and take the queen away. And, that's another way because that's like an artificial swarm where they think they've swarmed. Another thing I think that's important if you want to prevent swarms, and I think Bob Benny's talked on this quite a bit, is young, vibrant queens. You got younger queens that are less likely to swarm. I've heard him talk about how if you got a queen that's in her second year, her second spring, there's a pretty good chance she's looking to swarm. And a third year queen is really going to be looking for the trees unless you manage her very carefully. And even then still they want to go. And so like you said, Greg, that's kind of nature's way of creating something for the future. That queen, I think many times when I've caught prime swarms in the spring, they'll build up very quickly and beautifully into a nice, strong colony. But before you know it, that queen's superseded. As soon as they get that thing established, if it's an old queen and she does her job and they get going, lots of times they'll replace that queen. And I think that's just nature's way of multiplying and increasing the count of hives in nature. And that's how bees have been so successful in proliferating and surviving for thousands of years. So anyway, that's kind of my management. I don't panic. I just, at the moment, it depends on what I want to do, what I have time to do. And we just decide from there. But like you said, Greg, you mentioned at the conference and you mentioned just then, those swarm cells are actually probably the very best cells you can have because the bees set it up. They built the cup. The queen laid an egg in there and they babied those things and they gave them the proper nutrition. And those are going to be your very best cells, very best queens, I think, that you can possibly have. But it just doesn't always work out to be able to use them all every time you see a bunch of swarm cells. So the one thing that I absolutely do not like about swarming, that I despise about swarming, is when they cast that first prime swarm And then I don't know why they do this, but they start to swarm out. Like they'll have all these little cast swarms or secondary swarms that just they swarm
Mhm.
and swarm and swarm and swarm. And some bees have a tendency to do that to where you'll start off with a double deep and you'll come back and there's like just one frame of bees and you're like, oh my gosh, what happened? Sometimes they'll just swarm out and just I don't know why
Swarm
they do that
death.
sometimes and sometimes they don't. But man, that is so discouraging when that happens. And it seems to happen more a little later in the summer. It doesn't seem to happen quite as much in the spring. In the spring, you're more likely to have the prime swarm, and then the bees will settle in and go ahead and make some honey when that honey flow kicks in. So,
Mhm.
great discussion. I haven't been able to read the comments coming through because I've been
What?
so.
How many years have either of you kept a queen, just to see how long you can keep a queen?
I've had some that I think were probably 3 years old, maybe, possibly.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've any older or not. I didn't used to mark them. I've started marking them, and so I haven't. I don't know for sure because it's just hard to know. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I think I know we've gone at least 4. Um, it's hard to say 5 for sure. I know we've definitely gone 4. I know last year, intentionally, we had a bunch of white dots, running around.
I,
No more blue dots. We've got some purples, which purples were a transition between blue after kind of during the season of blue, and then that next part, and of course the first pinks were also in that time frame. So we've got some currently that are out there right now that are probably 3 years old. But I would say 80% of our stock is going to be first year, and more importantly, solstice queens, and the rest are just going to be a mix of 2, just very few 2, and then intentionally some ones that are a little bit older. But man, that's why I'm such a big fan of solstice queens. Is they send that they don't seem to want to they don't have that tendency, being a little
yeah,
later in the year, and the being
well,
the being Caucasian I think helps too.
they probably peak right. Probably are really hitting their stride about the time the next spring rolls around. So they're just in their prime. If you have a solstice
Yeah,
queen, I imagine.
yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about longevity of queens if we discuss queens a little bit more here a little bit later on in the chat. But I wanted to kind of move on to the next topic here. And, obviously coming into springtime, splits is a major topic for people wanting to do increases.
mhm.
And so, I know each of us in our different situation, each of our situations has a different strategy for what we're trying to do with splits. And so, Greg, maybe we could lead off with you here a little bit. Once again, we're in springtime here. We're talking about swarming. We're talking about some of those tendencies. It can actually move right into the next topic, which is splits. It's a similar time of year when all this is going on. So, as maybe a little bit of a larger beekeeper or more of a commercial guy, what do you do for splits? How do you once again use the bees to your advantage to increase your numbers and have the number of bees that you want to have?
I'm gonna try to maybe compartmentalize that because there are many different avenues in which we are making increase, and then as far as the configuration and how we're going about doing that, I mean, we every year we get into a situation where we're splitting mating nukes, and getting those out and getting fresh comb in. There are times of the year where we are doing nothing but cycling queens on a 28 to 35-day cycle, and so things are always getting broke down. What I like to encourage folks to start to get into the mentality of, if you're not already, is really start putting focus in designating and earmarking a number of colonies to do certain tasks within your operation. Whether you've got 4 colonies or 400, I have been guilty in the past of running my stock too ragged and trying to do everything from everybody. And you find yourself in a situation where um, it's kind of like that dual purpose cow, right? We had this. Hopefully Susan's not watching this. We had this stint in life where we really thought Dexter cattle was the thing, right? Because we thought, hey, we can raise beef off this, and we can also make decent milkers. out of them. But just like Dexter cows and dual purpose chickens, they're never really good at either. You know, a dual purpose chicken has a mediocre meat carcass and it lays eggs, but not really as good as a designated meat bird or a designated egg layer. Same thing with the cattle's. The same thing with your bees too. It is really hard to do more than one task really well unless you earmark certain colonies as just being uh, the bees that you're going to just constantly pull from and rob out until there's nothing there, and then you got to have the guts to just break it all down and let them figure it out. So what I mean by all that is we intentionally, and I'll just talk briefly, Bruce, about some of what that means for us. Is that first and foremost, one of the main things that we're concerned with coming out of the wintertime is getting those colonies to make drones. So I'm not giving them a bunch of extra boxes. I'm not doing a lot of things like that. I want them to get towards that swarm mode as soon as they possibly can, because until they reach those little metrics throughout their journey, they don't just wake up in the spring and say, "Hey, look at all this extra room that we have in here. Let's make drones today." They have to go through this process. They start to build up the colony has a certain essence. They've got the food stores. They've got all the pollen. They've got the nectar incoming. They're brooding up. They're doing all those things. What we see is the standard operating procedure for the colonies. They build up. They replenish all the things that they've lost throughout the year. We help that with syrup and pollen patties. They start to get built back up. They start to build population. Once they start doing those things, we'll start to see a couple little what we just call fake cups, where there are queen cells that just look like squatty light bulbs, nothing on the inside. At the same time, we'll notice an influx in drone population, drone cells, primarily capped drones. When we see an influx in drones, 9 times out of 10, the next step is going towards real or viable queen cells. And so it's a progression. We don't just get into a colony and out of the blue, there are swarm cells. Now, there could be supersedure cells, there could be other things like that. But for right now, talking about making splits, you can you don't have to get taken by surprise for a colony necessarily. And so we watch them along and then we can kind of plan. That being said, I like to have as many colonies as I possibly can riding that line of swarming where they're doing nothing but making gobs and gobs of drones. It's a double-edged sword. You've got to have drone saturation for queen mating, and that's what our primary focus is raising queens and raising nukes. So we've got to have a lot of drones and be intentional about having those colonies make drones. You also have to be on top of your mite game too, because just as quickly as you can have huge populations in drones, if you are crippled with viral loads, not only will those colonies be humbled and broke all the way back down, but you'll notice your cell starters aren't doing their job. The queens that you're making just don't look right. They're not vibrant. They're not prolific. So you've got to be careful there too. But we earmark colonies for nothing but drone producing colonies. That's the main thing. From there, we have colonies as those grow too big and they're getting a little bit outside of a double box, double deeps with a super. When they start getting outside of the configurations that we are managing for, then we turn that frown upside down. The problem is the solution. We thin out those bees and start making gobs and gobs of splits. At the same time we do that, we're going right through there. And if we see cells on frame, we either cut the cells out, we'll use the frames, and we'll go ahead and get a quick head start on making early mating nukes and things out of the colonies, especially when we have tons and tons of drones running around. And then, of course, you have colonies that you intentionally are going through that you have earmarked to make nukes from, whether you're putting a double screen on top and you're splitting out double deeps the easy way, or if you're going through and literally splitting the tar out of them, which is what we typically do. Go into a yard of 4-ways with pallets of nukes, and we go through and literally we will go through and dig. Sometimes without even looking for the queen, we'll pull out brood, we'll pull out food, we'll pull out some resources, and we will just split everything to kingdom come, and only leave, if we see the queen, only leave the queen and a few support frames back in the original box. Everything else goes out into nukes that we'll take out to another yard, or we'll close up there in the same yard even and drop queen cells in. So I don't want to spend all night talking about all the things that we do pertaining to that, but the thing I want folks to understand is start to earmark numbers of colonies that do different jobs, knowing that if you are making splits or making queens, you've got to have drones. So think about setting up drone colonies just for that. Set up colonies that you know that you're going to just split, and then set up other colonies there as a buffer that you can use to pull bees from if you need to, or to grow up for a honey crop.
That sounds great, Brian. What is your strategy with your splits? What is your? I know you're the hobby guy, so how do you utilize them in
Conservative
your
fellow.
operation?
What was that?
How do you use splits in your operation when you're trying to stay at a certain level? What do you do?
Yeah, last year I got myself into trouble because um, I ended up getting too many colonies. Uh, it just the apiary grew too big for what I can handle. Um, I literally, when I look at my colonies, I know like some folks will pull two splits off of their colonies. I typically only do one, and I'm very conservative about it just because I don't want to like pull so much off of my main colonies that it hinders their honey production. Um, Last year, what did I came out of winter with I think 10 colonies, and I ended up at like 23, I think, after all my splits, and it was just too much. Um, this year I'm at a good number coming out of the winter where my splits won't take me to a number that's too much. Now, in the future, if I end up with any number more than 15 I think is going to be my cap. I'm just going to make up little nukes and just I'll just talk to people. Hey, do you know anybody that needs a nuke? And when they're ready to go, I'm just going to get rid of them. I don't want. Well, it's not that I don't want that many. It's just that I can't keep an apiary with those numbers and properly manage them. And then you end up getting into a situation like last year, a lot of my mistakes, and like through the winter, the colonies that I lost, there were a couple of those that were my own darn fault because I didn't have the time to manage them. So, we've heard before that you will be humbled and you will end up at the number that you can properly manage. Well, it happened to me. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's moving forward. Anything more than like my number, they'll get sold. It has to happen.
Yeah, that's right. And I kind of, I kind of tried everything. This year I utilized splits for a couple of reasons. Number one, the biggest reason is to replace loss. Last year, my
Yeah.
honey crop was not good. I'm trying to get my numbers up for a good production crop. And so the logical question might be, why do you split when you want to produce, have more production? And because doesn't that weaken your colonies? Don't you lose production when you do that? But I think if you time it right, especially in this area, when those bees are building really quickly and busting at the seams, uh, there's not a lot coming in. There's just some real kind of weak flows
Mhm.
coming in just to build the bees. It stimulates them, but they're not really making honey as far as a crop. And so if you can split them up, you can humble them a little bit early in the season. There's plenty of time here for them to grow and build back up before the main flow hits. So I utilize those strategies. I still got some really massive, strong colonies, and even some of the new splits I made with those mated queens should be able to produce some honey for me this year. But theoretically, it helps prevent swarming a little bit. Also helps, me have more colonies that may be able to produce, and it seems healthy for the bees to be able to do those splits. And number three, I just enjoy it. So, and as far as the type of splits I do, you can watch my last few videos. I mean, I do a little bit of everything. The video that just dropped yesterday, actually, I talk about blind splits that I do, which is something I learned from a couple of guys that do it commercially, where you basically, if you got a double deep or whatever you got a big strong colony. Hey, just make sure there's brood in both boxes. Split them with. Don't even have to find the queen, and then drop a cell in both colonies. And the theory is that in the colony that's queenless, obviously they'll accept that new queen cell, and she'll theoretically go out and get mated and make a nice queen and hive. And then the other one, they'll figure it out. And I've heard different statistics of people who have done that and kind of what the success rate of replacing the old queen is with the virgin queen. And it's pretty high, I think, for the virgin to win out. But I think if you've got a good, vibrant, strong queen, she may win out. But either way, the idea is that you have a strong colony. And if you make sure that you have resources in both colonies, you make sure you have some brood a lot, even with maybe some young larvae in there. If something happens, if that queen cell does not emerge, if it's a dud or whatever, the bees can make their own queen. And so it just works out well. But that's why I use splits. Biggest reason to increase numbers. Obviously, in the future, my goal is to be able to start producing nukes, maybe some resource hives and things like that as well, to possibly even sell. But we've had a lot of discussion on here about. I just want to make sure I've got good quality nukes, good quality bees, and I'm really, really working hard on the attitude of the bees. Everybody down here says, pretty much. I mean, maybe there are some bees down here that are puppy dogs year round. But there is something, I don't know if it's when that yellow jasmine hits or whatever, but there is something that happens, in like February, late January, February, and maybe even early March a little bit, where the bees down here just get nasty, and they'll call when the true honey flow starts, like in April and May, they're happy just like bees are everywhere. But there is a period of time here where the bees are building, they're looking really good, they're strong, but they just get spicy. And I don't know if it's something they're bringing in. There's some type of nectar or pollen or something that just makes them that way, but there's something, Mike Berry was having that experience. If you saw his most recent video, man, the bees were just off the chain going crazy. They look like my bees out there, like my videos. And so, and I've heard other people say the same thing, where even nice bees sometimes can get a little bit crazy in certain weather conditions and certain conditions. And so, but that's my goal with my splits, is to be able to do those different things, have plenty of production colonies, maybe prevent swarming a little bit, and then hopefully in the future to be able to create a better bee, a better product, be able maybe sell some bees and some nukes down the road. I hope that helped. And if you want to see how I actually do my splits, the last several videos of mine actually kind of show how I do that. Hey, we got
Connor.
Also, we got Connor in here from over in Israel. Welcome, Connor. Hope all is well with you and your family.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Connor is in Connecticut.
Is he? Is he on the state side now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, there was a great comment earlier. I missed. I can't remember what the topic was, but someone asked where I got my queen cells. I got them in a local. There's a lady down here just south of here, about an hour, in a place called Chipley, Florida, called Sleeping Bear Apiaries, and she sells queen cells every spring. They're actually based out of Michigan, but they come down there to Chipley, and they set their operation in there for a little while, I think, here in the spring, and every year she makes some queen cells. She told me that they used to be really big, and they would produce queen cells for a lot of the big commercial people around, but she's kind of backing off on that a little bit, and is really kind of leaning more towards the sideline or hobby type beekeepers now. She's not producing, I don't think, thousands and thousands of cells like she used to, but I've had good luck with her cells in the past. And I want you to know, I'm still planning on making some of my own here in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to give it a shot and try and see if I can figure out how to do that queen raising thing. I've always been intimidated. It's just so easy to drive an hour, and within this area where I'm at, even you can go 2 to 3 hours in any direction, and you can just find as many queen cells as you possibly want. There are several people around here that do that. It's just so easy to pay $5 a cell and have all you want. It's just so easy, and they have to worry about the timing. I don't have to do all that, but I still do want to do it. I've got a couple of colonies that are just such good bees. They're just, in my opinion, they're just doing all those things, a lot of things that Greg talks about in the colonies. They're just doing a lot of things that I want my bees to do, just super gentle, just really nice bees. And so I want to get some queens off of those if I can. And that's kind of my goal. That's my next step. But I'm so busy trying to do everything else. It's hard to do that.
Greg, when Bruce starts saying things like, I want to raise my own queens, immediately pops into my head fake news.
Oh man, you put me on the spot.
Fake
Brian.
news.
Come on. Okay.
If I didn't see Bruce standing in a room and there was a discussion on queen rearing this past weekend, then I might say that. But he was in a breakout session on queen rearing. So we will see.
Actually, like to give a shout out to Mike and Laurie Lawrence up there with Hamburg Honey. They did that presentation. They did a great job with that, and I saw them commenting in here earlier.
Yeah,
they've got a fun channel. It's Hamburg Honey. It's just a fun channel. Go check it out if you can. Yeah. I wanted to just step back for a minute, guys, and just recognize and say we appreciate everyone in the chat here tonight. We've just gone fast and furious. We haven't really talked a lot about the folks in here, and there's no way we could recognize everybody by name in here, but we see a lot of familiar names, and I've seen a couple of names that I don't think I'll recognize. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. And once again, as much as we talk about bees on here, as you always say, Greg, and it's kind of become our motto, the bees are the conduit to the people. And so it's really, yes, it's about bees. We can talk about bees all the time, but really it's about what happens in this comment section over here. Everybody talking back and forth with each other in the community that's been established with everything we're trying to do. See, Ian just hopped in here. And so, man, appreciate you coming in, Ian, and everybody else. And there's Hamburg Honey right there checking in. So, but man, cool. We just got the folks that are always on here, and then we got a lot of people that kind of come in and out as they can. And we just appreciate everyone. If you're in here for
look at Brian's comment. Oh, that's gold.
Well, Brian, you got to understand now. My Ozark yard, those are my puppy dogs up there now. They're the nice bees. I got rid of all the mean ones up there.
So, that's awesome.
Yeah. That's great.
If they build up strong, whenever I get back up there and check on them, I think I'm going to have some that are pretty strong, and they'll be nice. They better be, since they're Greg's and Michael Palmer queens up there. They better be nice. Otherwise, I'll have to.
If you can't make nice bees from those, Bruce, then I don't know what to tell you. Time to.
I know.
Take some yards out of commission and start fresh on some new soil somewhere. But it's important for you to start the journey with queens. Right. But as you guys heard, I always try to throw it out there, because a lot of folks will let perfection be the enemy of good, and they'll try to figure out all these things when it comes to queen rearing, and they never actually get to the point where they've got a cap cell to do anything with, because of all the steps and sequences going from selecting grafting material to a cell starter to actually getting the appropriate size age out and then into a cup, and on and on and on and on and on. There's so many steps there to do that. So I don't need to go down that road tonight, but it is a part of our queen rearing talk. Is if you need to make less than 30 queens a week, maybe there is another way to do that by letting the bees do all the work and making way better cells than you're ever going to. And you can do it in a way to where you can learn the timing of cap cells first and foremost. And once you master that, now you have that shortcut to success. Now you always have that skill set moving forward. So if your grafting goes south or your starter gets cold or on and on, you always know you can go pull cells from somewhere else. You know what to do with them. And then you start at the beginning and tighten up the actual grafting process. You put those two things together and you will find success on a much greater and faster route than if you just start with grafting first before you've done any of it. There are just so many pitfalls along the way. But Bruce, I think it's something that you're going to have to get started in doing. And it'll be kind of fun to watch your journey along the way. It's definitely extremely rewarding and heartbreaking all at the same time. But that's farming.
Before we move on to the next topic, I'd like to go through and recognize a few folks. Brian Bennett, appreciate the super chat, super sticker there. Thanks so much for being a part of our chat tonight. Brian is a frequent. I think you're on here once every week, Brian. We certainly appreciate you being on here. We got David Lewis from Lewis Farming.
Do you see what's on his shoulder there? I love that picture.
What is it? Tell me what it is. Oh, is it a mite?
It's one of my varroa mites.
There you go. Love David, thanks so much for the super chat tonight. I really appreciate that. Of course, Brian, thank you so much. And then my buddy Brian Lee up in Birmingham, Alabama. Thanks so much, Brian. And we're going to make sure whenever I get these queens, we're going to make sure you get at least some of them to try. We'll figure out a way to do that. And we'll try and make sure they're nice ones. We're going to try and figure that out. But we're going to get there one of these days.
What I just read from Brian's comment right there is he wants to make sure that you graft from the chippiest, I think that's a word, the chippiest queen out of Ozark.
Yeah, if we do that.
Mated with drones from the Ozark area.
Wow,
that's what it
that's
sounds like to
special.
me. That sounds like that to me. And as they say here in the South, Lord be willing and the creek don't rise. I'm going to do it one of these days. That's a little comment here in the South they use a lot. And then appreciate the super chat from Carol. Carol's apiary, sort of a beekeeper. I appreciate all the knowledge all three of you share every week. We appreciate you for joining us tonight, and thanks so much for the super chat. And these super chats really mean a lot. They really help help our channels move forward and help us to be able to do, be able to afford the time and the effort and the energy and the equipment to be able to keep putting them on. So we really appreciate these guys. It means a lot to us, and we just appreciate all you guys. So let me get back over to my chat stream here. And
wow.
oh my
Thank you, Connor.
gosh. Oh my gosh, Connor. Thanks
That's
so much,
tremendous.
man.
Thank you.
Connor, I've kind of grown an affinity for Connor. Connor reached out to me a while back, and he is actually over in Israel. Like Brian said, maybe he's stateside tonight, visiting, or maybe he's over here. But
there,
go ahead,
there were. I just caught his last video the other day, and watch his last video. It explains.
I'll have to do that. Okay.
Yeah, it explains what's going on. So, I believe he's back stateside. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know that just not long ago, he was making videos with jets flying overhead with the war going on over there. He was literally making war zone videos. And so
Wow.
you could hear the planes and the helicopters and you could hear everything flying overhead. And Israel, everything's fairly close. There's nothing, you're not far away from the action over there, I don't think at all. So we really appreciate Brian for checking in, or not Brian, Connor for checking in here and being a part of this chat and this community as well. And it's been very interesting watching his videos over the last few months since he reached out to us. So awesome stuff, guys, man. We are already over an hour into this thing, and it seems like we just started. But I wanted to kind of move on to the next topic. I know there have been a few questions rolling in here, so maybe we could try and start some of those, Brian, as they come in. If we miss you, I apologize. You can put them in all caps. That helps us kind of be able to identify them. I'd like to move on to another topic here for a few minutes, and then maybe at the end we can answer some of those questions if they roll in, and we'll be able to help get that done. But let's talk a little bit about queens. Now, obviously, we could go on all night about this, but I think if we could kind of focus in on queens in the spring and how they affect our different operations. I know one thing that I run across, and I know everybody runs across this, but especially maybe folks in the South that get early splits done, is queen availability, trying to find queens. That's one reason I think that, well, there's two reasons to use cells down here. Number one, they're more readily available quicker, than actual mated queens are. And number two, they're cheaper. But Greg, you're the queen guru. Can you speak a little bit about queens in the springtime? Obviously, we can talk about queens all year long, but talk a little bit about just whatever direction you want to go with this thing, queens in the springtime. What do you think?
Ooh.
Well, I wouldn't say queen guru, unless by guru you mean you've done enough things wrong to be an expert at the hard lessons learned with queens. But I tell you, Bruce, the queen aspect is seems cliche to say it is such a fundamental part of the colony, but not just a good queen, having a great queen. Anybody out there can make a queen, right? And she may look like a queen and walk around like a queen, but the essence of a true queen is evident, I think, by the overall health and vibrancy of a colony. That's an interesting relationship in and of itself, but having a good quality queen that has a good support staff and has a good team makes all the difference in the world. And I do think a lot of times I want to be careful how I brain dump what I'm thinking about a lot of this, because right now, we've been a little off the radar when it comes to our purpose and our goals of instrumental artificial insemination, using virgins, using queen cells. And what I will say is that we do have a line of what we are call the Appalachian mite mauler. and it is a cross up of some VSH stock virgins that were bred here in our heavily dominated Caucasian yards. And as a result, we ended up with a really beautiful salt and pepper stock of bees, a lot darker than what these VSH Italians would have came from. Why does all that matter? Well, when folks are thinking of making splits, like Bruce mentioned, you've got a couple different routes to go. In other parts of the country, you may have access. Like when you're in Bruce's neck of the woods, you're only, within 6 to 8 hours south and east of him, you can get into queen cell mecca, where there are queen cells being made all, especially the Orlando area. There are so many queen cells that are made and available not too far away, where you can, when you have the brood and they're brooding up and they're just getting to the point of making the queen cells, you can fast track that by 7 to 14 days by having queen cells, especially queen cells made by professionals. One of the things that I mentioned it briefly in the panel, it was Dr. Peck, Adam and Grayo, Cayman, and myself at this last conference, and the Queen talk and Mite talk and these things, sort of came up. But one of the things that I learned from, in my opinion, one of the best at it is Chris Werner and his entire crew, Pete Ellis, his family. Genetics matter. They do, but what actually makes a good quality queen is the quality in which the environment in which she is actually raised in, the health and nutrition of the cell starter, the age that things are grafted matters, but also candling and quality queen cells matter too. All those things go hand in hand with actually having a virgin queen who is hatching in a colony who even has a chance to go get mated. Of course, things are leaning on how well she gets mated, how well she comes back. But it is my firm opinion, I am particularly not fond of virgin queens at all. And I know there's a lot of talk about using virgin queens one way or the other. But what I'll say is, if it took 45 to 50 virgin queens to get 9 that made it through the winter, that were healthy and prolific and didn't have attitude problems, that is a financial risk that is well worth it for me to find 9 out of 50 that cut the mustard. That for me is a good investment. But if folks are looking at virgins to simply requeen or to serve some other purpose, I'm a firm believer that a queen cell is a far better choice. For whatever reason, there is so much complication and nuance to introducing virgins, even from reputable queen breeders, where if that virgin is a day or two older than anticipated or younger, that dramatically, in my opinion, influences the acceptance rate. But however, when you drop a queen cell in a colony, it's as almost you can do no wrong. When that virgin emerges inside of that colony, even with other virgins or with the mother queen in there, there's a different dynamic at play. Now, I'm not even going to begin to try to unpack that because I don't fully understand it. I just know from my own personal experience that utilizing virgin queens are typically accidents unless you get into insemination. And when you get into artificial insemination, you are forced to get into the virgin queen game for specific reasons because that's your material you're working with. But what I want to encourage folks is if you are going to be making splits, if you're going to be trying to import stock early on, what Bruce did is actually not only genius from a financial standpoint, but from the risk itself. Even if, let's say, even if you dropped 2 queen cells in every single split as a backup plan, you're going to have $9 to $12 in those queen cells. It pacifies the colony. Those queens hatch out on site. There's just a certain prolificness, vibrancy, and essence of that queen under those circumstances that, in my opinion, trump when a virgin queen or a mated queen is caged and shipped and then goes to the end user. Something happens with the quality and the efficacy of that queen. I don't fully understand, but I've seen it over and over and over again. But queen cells, especially when you can get them hand delivered, that is where there is real opportunity. So personally, I prefer to fool with only queen cells when I can. And virgins are kind of happy little accidents that we try to figure out, well, how can we make these stick?
Bruce is
You're
muted.
muted again, Bruce. It's okay. It's
Hey,
just us three.
while
It's
he's
just us
muted,
three.
It was
while he's
Brian's turn
muted,
anyway.
no, I was going to say while he's muted, is there? And I know this could. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole with this because this could probably turn into a heck of a discussion. But is there anything in particular that you look at as far as when you are selecting the virgins for insemination?
There is a lot of times you're going through, um, you're there are several steps ahead of the virgin quality that are already kind of leaning you towards this as a candidate. But overall vibrancy, weight, size, how the colony is kind of interacting with her to begin with, I think is something that you definitely look for. A lot of times, for our own experience, getting into artificial insemination, um, we're making a lot of motions, a lot of practice attempts, and while the success rate's good, we are talking about doing a very fine-tuned operation to a queen that's hinging on not only her health and vibrancy, but exactly the angles and the pressure and the things that we're doing by hand under a microscope to facilitate that semen introduction process to the queen. So that's a very long conversation, but in short, we look at a lot of the same things that we look at just overall health and quality, vibrancy, size, things of that nature. Those are some of the initial things that we look for. At the end of the day, a lot of the potential for the longevity and health of that queen happened long ago back in the cell starter.
Mhm.
What you're looking at now from the insemination point on is uh, the efficacy of egg fertility. And that comes down to the process of insemination. And that's a whole conversation for a different day.
Hmm.
Greg, speak
Interesting.
if you could for a minute. Speak a little bit about when you're going through your colonies, when you first start opening them up for real and going through them in the spring when it warms up, and you're just entering into your busy time. I know it's always busy, but you're like, hey, it's game on. It's go time, so to speak. And you're really trying to assess those colonies and assess what they're going to do for you during the season. Are there any characteristics of particular queens that you decide to replace? How do you qualify a queen to remain in your operation, or how do you decide if that's a queen that needs to be replaced? What do you look for in those colonies to be able to make that determination?
That's a great question. Everyone's going to have a little bit different answer to that based on what your breeding program is. And I do think that a lot of folks, even on small scale, you can start a breeding program. And even if you would consider yourself a homestead apiary where you've got 200 hives or less, there's a lot of opportunity for you to not only get serious about a queen breeding program, but potentially even get into artificial insemination. There is information and training and equipment out there that can help you be successful. So I think anything is possible when it comes to that. First and foremost, I feel like you've got to have a backline stock of genetics that you have a pretty good handle on what their performance actually is. They're able to get through the winter. For us in Ohio, we're not smart enough yet to be migratory beekeepers. So we're stuck here in Ohio doing all of these tasks, and it's not an ideal place to be in because our window is so short. But I feel like it is um, it helps to filter out quality concerns pretty quickly. The things that we look for is some of the basics that you would obviously get. We're looking for temperament. We've got to have bees that we can work with. If we have mean bees that are a little bit better on hygiene and moving mites out of the equation, but they're not moving the mites out of the equation to the point to where we still have to treat, those aren't even candidates. We've got to have bees that we are comfortable and can work first and foremost. They've got to be gentle stock. They also, the great metric is winter. They have got to have seen a winter time and have came through. That's a big one. Once they come through the winter time, though, this is where we really start to put the screws to them. We have our metrics in whatever you are using. If you are using a Harbo assay, if you're using UBO, if you're using mite washes, if you're using whatever other metric, the main thing is to be consistent with your metric. As these bees are coming out of the spring, we have their history from last year and possibly the year before that to kind of watch and see what they do. As they come out of the spring, I'm looking for middle ground. I'm looking for the outliers, and to help, the first thing I do is try to identify the outliers. Which colonies just seem way too far ahead of everybody else, and which ones are absolute dinks who just haven't got the memo that spring is here. We do breed frugality into our colonies for sure, but we also breed prolificness, and so we're trying to constantly find the happy medium. Sometimes it feels as though maybe they're not frugal enough. Sometimes they're too frugal. So as they're jumping and they're moving and busting loose out of the springtime, we're looking for those colonies that just seem like they're on the right track. If we were looking at, let's say, 50 colonies, we're going to automatically take all the outliers away. Ones that needed a box way too soon, or ones that are just, it's a baseball-sized cluster and it's mid or late April. That's a major problem. Those ones, that queen, she's out of the equation completely. The colonies that are just mega producers and they're too big, too fat, if you could even say that's a thing, are ones that were on the borderline of eating themselves out of house and home in that late winter into spring time period. Those are ones we don't want. We will utilize those right now, and maybe we'll make a honey crop off of them. Or we'll shake nurse bees out, or we'll break them down for bulk bees for mating nukes and things like that. But I'm primarily looking for those middle ground colonies, the ones that have tested well in our metrics the year before, that they were calm natured, they overwintered, but they were uniform and consistent. So out of 50, we might find 10 to 20 that are just streamlined right down the middle. Out of those, we'll look to those ones that are right down the center, and we'll look to how gentle are they. How do they do over winter? What's their overall picture right now as far as mites go? And then healthy bees are like cows, goats, or any other livestock. When they're healthy, you see it. You can pick up on that. They've got a certain coat to them, a certain luster. We look for that too. Which colonies needed the least amount of us and are maintaining that middle streamline? Those are the ones that we're breeding for every single year.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, and as you do that, you'll continue to hone in on what your definition of or is the ideal bee, and that's the only way to do it, is to identify those that have the traits you want and focus on those while still utilizing, as you said, some of the other colonies that may not be perfect in other ways until you get to that that near perfect. I don't know if perfection is possible, but you get to that near perfect state. Brian, in your operation and your bees, what caused you? What criteria would you use to identify, maybe say, a queen that you might need to replace or you may not want to keep around anymore?
It's funny because this will be my 8th season. Last year being my 7th was the first year that I ever pinched a queen. I haven't run into many issues where a queen just really underperformed. I've got one colony now that is smaller than what I would like it, but to look at that queen coming out of the winter and say, well, she just isn't going to cut it. It was small going into the winter, so it just didn't have the size. I'm actually surprised that colony made it. So, but I hopefully, I think I look for every characteristic like every other person. Me, I like a honey crop, so I want a decent, I want a colony that's going to produce some honey for me. Temperament, if I could get a honey crop and I get bees that I can literally open up and I can just pet the frame, I would love that, but we all know with certain traits, certain characteristic with bees, it's almost like I say you have a point system, and you allocate points to a certain area, so you're not going to get this, in my opinion. I don't know. I'm no authority anyways, but we'll probably never have a bee that is overly, might I don't even want to say resistant, since somebody will run with that. But we'll probably never have a queen that's going to produce bees that fight off mites, that produce this astronomical amount of honey, that are so well behaved that you don't need a jacket or anything. But those are what I look for. I mean, it's almost like you need to find that happy median is what I look for. The one trait though that I always look at, and it could be the best honey producer in my apiary though, if I have a colony that is overly spicy, I just do not tolerate it whatsoever. I'm in the position though where, like, with my colonies being over at my mom's place, she's developed a little bit of a sensitivity and actually has an epi pen. So I can't have it. There's a couple that I got last year. There were those virgins that are just, she doesn't even, and Greg's been there, she doesn't even go down by the fence line that is 30 feet away because she's been chased. And that's just, to me, that's just, you can't have it, So, but, once I get rid of that, even if I have colonies that are okay producers as far as a honey crop, to me, that's fine, but like, I'm just the hobbyist guy. So for me, as long as I have colonies that are building up and kind of doing what they're doing and giving me a little bit of a honey crop, it's the reward as far as me being able to walk out there in that apiary, sit in the chair, and enjoy that time with the colonies. So I think I'm in a little bit of a different boat than others, being and I need to change that. I can't say I'm a hobbyist beekeeper. I'm a small scale beekeeper.
Look at that. Brian's coming out of the closet.
Well, no, that was Stan Gore.
Oh, I like it.
So, yeah.
Honey Money TV. That's Yappy, who has the alarm clock going off in the
It's
background.
probably Brian's 3D printers.
It is. It's printer.
Honey Money TV. What you're hearing is the sound of somebody printing money.
It's the sound of money. That's what that is.
I like that.
Well, I'll go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say I like that. I wish those things were printing money.
Well, they are. They are in one way.
They are.
I mean, in a way, yeah, they are. Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm still trying to figure the queen thing out, but as far as criteria for eliminating the queen, typically if I have a hive that is just undesirable, whatever the traits are, and I happen to have a replacement or a way to replace her, I'm going through there, I can go ahead and take care of that problem. Then I'll go ahead and pinch her. But one thing that I've been real guilty of, and I think most of us probably have been, is just hanging on too long. You got bees that are just crashing. You think, man, I'll just feed them. I'll just baby them. I'll just add a framer brood. I'll add this. I'll add that. And they just never, ever get better.
Get with it. Yep.
My initial mentor years ago, I've been in bees probably a year, at 2 at the most. And I was over at his house one day and he was talking about how, his wife and him did the bees together. He's showing his.
Look at that.
But he and his wife did bees together, and he was kind of griping a little bit about how his wife would just baby these bees. And he said, Bruce, you'll throw resources at these bees. Now he used real Southern language and, he didn't say it quite like that, but he was like, he's like, sometimes you'll baby them and you just have to dump them on the ground. Just dump the bees out, put the frames of resources in other colonies, and just move on with it. Those bees will find a new home. And sometimes it's just time to pull the trigger on a hive. Interesting bit of, I can't remember. It was at a beekeeping meeting years ago. Many of you have heard of the beetle blasters. I think they call them the Cuts beetle blasters, the black beetle blasters that everybody uses to destroy hive beetles. The gentleman that developed those beetle blasters lives in Chipley, which is the same town where I got my queen cells. His name is Lawrence Cuts. And he's passed away now, but I was a brand new beekeeper, probably maybe a couple of years in. I don't remember exactly when it was, but he came and talked to our bee club one night, and he talked about 3 distinct different types of colonies. And Greg, we're going to wax a little bit philosophical here. Maybe we're going to refer to a parable in the Bible here a little bit, but he talked about the parable of the talents. He said you
Mm.
got 3 different types of bees. He says you've got the 5 talent bees. You know, no matter what you do, you can't hold them back. You take splits from them. You know, you just do everything. You pull resources, take splits, and you just can't keep them down. They keep growing and growing and growing, and they're healthy and vibrant and beautiful bees. And they just continue to just plow forward and press on and do a great job. And they multiply their efforts, right? They multiply their talents, and they're just incredible. And then you have the 2 talent bees that are just what you expect. They're really good bees. They just produce and they do well. They're just your average strength. They produce a honey crop every year. They're just good bees, good quality bees. But they're not the 5 talent bees. But you know, the Lord was happy with both of those people that increased their talents and did what their measure of success was. And he said, and then you have the 1 talent bees that just don't do anything. No matter what you do, they don't increase their resources. They never grow. They may live, and we've all had colonies like that. They may live for 3 years and never get out of a deep box. You know, they just somehow survive, and they kind of they survive, and they're survivor bees, but they're not productive bees. And so sometimes you just have to get rid of those bees that aren't producing the way you want them to. Maybe replace that queen, maybe dump them on the ground or whatever. And so if you're if you're a small scale beekeeper, it's very difficult sometimes to pull that trigger. And I'm still guilty of it. I've been through hundreds of colonies, and I still want to nurse and baby these bees along. But I'll also say, you know, Greg, with the different types of genetics, and you know, your bees, they breed way back in the wintertime, and sometimes you have Carniolas, you have Caucasians, different types of bees that will breed way back, and they will absolutely surprise you in the spring when they explode. So
Right.
if you're going in a beehive like here in Alabama, and you've got these feral bees around here that probably have Italian in them, they've got probably got some Cordovan in them, some Italian in them, some whatever in them that are just busting the seams in a double deep. And then you look next door and you've got a colony that's on like 3 or 4 frames of comb in the hive, and it's February 15th. Give them some time and see what happens, because when that real honey flow kicks in, some of those colonies will outproduce the big, strong Italian hive. So you can't pull the trigger too fast. You know what I mean? That's important, I think, to be sure that you're careful about that. Another thing I would say to kind of wrap up maybe the topic on queens is, and I've mentioned this on the chat before, but some of you may not have heard this. My mentor, the same guy that told me to just dump dud bees on the ground, sometimes it's not worth trying to keep them around. You know, those bees will find them in their colony and they'll be fine. But he said, I used to, when I first got into beekeeping, I would check the hive, and I didn't know really how to find eggs. I didn't know what I was doing. So I go in there, I wouldn't find any eggs. I would decide that I was queenless. So I would go, he would sell queens back then. He sold queens as well. He created some queens and sold some queens. And so I'd say, David, I need a queen. I'm queenless. One of my hives, he'd say, Bruce, you need to just hold on a couple of weeks and just see what happens. You may have your queen in there. Just don't, he'd be like, don't, you know, just give it a couple of weeks first. And I'd be like, no, David, I'm queenless. I got to have a queen. So I bought several queens from him. He's like, all right, I'll sell you a queen. And so I bought several queens from him. And that happened to me several times that first year, maybe my second year too. I think it was more that first year. And finally, I listened to him. And the next year, whenever it was, the next time it happened, I decided just to take his advice and wait a couple of weeks. And I remember distinctly, it was up at the farm going through a colony. I think it may have been a little bit later in the daytime, and seeing this milky substance in the bottom of the cells. And I said, David, there's something kind of looks like milk in the bottom of these cells. He's like, well, that means you've got a queen. So sometimes we've got to be patient, is the message I'm trying to give here. Those queens, those bees had either swarmed or superseded and had a brand new vibrant queen, and they're just beginning to lay. Whereas a week or two before I got in there and seen nothing like that, the previous year I would have purchased a queen and spent that money and probably gotten her killed, because the new queen in the hive, you know, it would have been a beat down. One of them would have gotten killed and I would have wasted money. Whereas because I took his advice, you know, I ended up with a queen in there that did a good job. And I've learned now that if I go in a hive that's looking suspicious in whatever way, whether it be spotty brood pattern, no eggs, maybe a small cluster, when they should be starting to build up, just give it a couple of weeks. Now, if you go in 2 weeks and there's still nothing in there, it's time to probably take some action and figure something out. But at that point, but just give it a little time, be patient with your bees, and many times they'll reward you with success. Not always, but probably more times than not, they'll reward you with success. The other thing I would say is, if you're in the spring flow and everything is all the birds and the bees and everybody's happy, you got flowers blooming, everything's green, and you're going in colonies that have overwintered, but they have a really bad spotty brood pattern, they're just crashing and they're weak and just go ahead and replace that queen. Greg, would you agree with that? Especially if you're in the prime time of the year and they're just not doing anything, I think it's time to go ahead and pull the trigger on that and
I
get
think
her
a lot
replaced.
of times you get into this hamster wheel of thinking where, oh, they just need this and they'll be fine, or if I just do this, they'll break through. But I love that you brought the parable of the talents into this conversation, because that is probably the most beautiful way to try to understand that, especially when you couple that with Proverbs 13:22 that we opened up with earlier on. That if you just think about this, and it relays to swarms more than you think, or assets itself, but a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. You can read into that a bunch of different ways, but I like to look into that as, if we are going to leave an inheritance to our children's children, it's not necessarily that we're going to do so much and create so many assets that it's going to just go right down to our children and their children. But think about, if we're creating enough assets or the things that are important in this life, that's passing to our kids are now doing the same thing for their kids. If you are the generation that starts that, or if you are part of that growth, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children by setting up his children to do the same thing. What does that have to do with what we're talking about? When you look at the parable of the talents, those that were given one talent, and when the Lord came back and they still only had that one talent, you're disappointed, right? Because they didn't grow that asset. They were given this asset, this one talent. So if you think of it as think of talents as a financial investment. I gave you this lump sum as a financial investment, and when I came back to see what return, how you grew that, I came back to find the same amount. That's a little bit disappointing. But if I give you this one investment and then you double that, awesome, because now you're on the right track. If I come back and you took that one investment and you had a growth times 5, wow, that's amazing. So when we're looking at our colonies, I look at them, every single frame, as an asset, every single colony. And if that colony is not doubling the asset, and it's just, even if it's just standing idle, it's got to go. We've got to move those resources into another colony who can take that one talent or that one investment and double it or triple it or quadruple it. And so as we're going through the yard, when we see that colony that is just idling and they're not really doing anything, I'll say it. I'll shake all the bees off right under the ground, and I'll move the actual asset, which is the food, the pollen, and the nurse bees, onto another colony who can get with the program and do something with it. And what I found in doing that, you sort of cut those losses early on before they're a liability, before they start dwindling in numbers, before they've got pollen they can't protect and the hive beetles have an opportunity. You get ahead of it before it even happens. And then you're not so much reprimanding the colony, you're just moving those assets on to another colony who can actually do something with it. And like you mentioned, those bees that you shake onto the ground, guess what? They figure it out. Take the box off, the bottom board, everything off, that out of the way. They have no place to go. They figure it out. Now everything is moving way further forward and faster.
That's just some incredible stuff, and that's so true. And now, Brian, I've discovered, I just shared this concept with Greg, and I may have mentioned it before, but now, Greg, I can see you taking this and making a whole talk out of it, because
Thanks, Bruce.
It really is a great topic, and you're so much better with words than I am. It is incredible. But so that's kind of, I think in the springtime, queens is a topic we can talk about all year round, but in the springtime, it's a little bit of a different way of looking at things. You just, at least in my case, I can't afford to be quite as patient with bees in the spring when everything's going well. They should be growing. They should be moving forward. If they've got the resources, bees are meant to grow, to reproduce, and to make honey. And if they're not doing any of those things, it's time to move forward and either replace the queen situation or move those resources into other colonies where they can utilize those resources to do what they're supposed to do. And so now other times of the year when bees do brood back, anyway, then it's a little more difficult to tell when to do that. But in the springtime, in the middle of a flow, you got to learn how to recognize that. And as you get in your bees, you'll kind of know what that is like. And Greg, you mentioned the vibrancy about healthy bees, and that is very true. It's hard to describe. One comparison that I can make is recently here we had an outbreak of yellow jasmine, which is not good for the bees. It seems like they get, it's not deadly to most colonies, but it just kind of hits them. It weakens them. It gives them a punch in the face a little bit. The bees don't look as healthy, but boy, when they start coming out of that and everything looks better, you can just tell the difference in the bees. You can tell the difference in looking at sick bees and healthy bees. There's just a difference in it. And so really right now is, we're in it here in the South, but as the springtime moves up north and everybody gets in their hives, I hope some of this stuff we've talked about tonight will help you be able to assess your bees. And, we talk more about concepts on here. We can't describe every situation for every person. One thing I like to do on my channel is show what I'm doing over my shoulder, looking in the colonies, show you ways to do things, but that doesn't mean that's going to work for you. That's what you need to do. It's just some ideas, maybe of some conceptual things, and show you what I'm actually doing. So maybe it can help give you some ideas. Let's see. What did I do last weekend? I'm fired up. I was up at Wisconsin. Of course I was fired up, man. Good food and great friends.
Let's go.
Hanging out with these two yahoos, man. Cheese, David says there. Well, listen, we're we've talked about the three main topics for tonight. Brian, did you have anything you'd like to add about the queen discussion, or you think we pretty much covered it there?
I am a small scale beekeeper. If I have issues with queens, I drive down 77. I cut across Route 70, and I visit this joker that he'll make me work and won't pay you in donuts, but I always leave happy. So
awesome. Well, listen, we have quite a few comments or questions. I'd like to kind of do a rapid fire session here. Brian, let's go into those and start kind of going through those. But first of all, maybe recognize we had a couple more super chats roll in here. Once again, we really appreciate that. We talked about Connor and his super chat. Thanks so much, Connor, for the $50 super chat. Right there. We had Brian G from Straight Creek Apiary. Thanks for the super chat. Thanks for all you guys do. Love your videos. Appreciate it, man. Matt Kirkland came in with a $5 super chat, super sticker. Thanks so much, Matt. Matt has become somewhat of a friend of mine. He's over in Houston, Texas. I think he's seen a lot of the same kind of stuff we're seeing over here. It's a very similar biome, I think, or climate over there. So let's go ahead and hit some of these questions here. We got a few. Let's see. Dave, that's a good question. Talking about queens, David from Lewis Family Homestead said, would you recommend to requeen with a solstice queen every year? Greg, why don't you hit that one since you're the queen guru of the bunch?
I would say, put a plan together for requeening. And if you are bringing queens in, your timing is largely going to be based on the timeline that you got your order in. So if you had the opportunity and choice of what time of the year you're going to requeen, I think is largely based on what are your goals for that colony. If you are planting genetic seed for the future, I would highly encourage you to consider solstice queens, just because of they tend to be less swarmy. They're fresh coming onto that following spring's flow. And I think they overwinter a lot better that way. If you are splitting out of dire necessity early in the spring and you've got to bust them down because they're just getting too much, you're not going to have that luxury. It doesn't mean that queen is going to be inferior. It's just she may not carry on some of the pros that a solstice queen would. If you had and you could time it, we're going to talk a lot more about this year, including more details about queen cells, using them, more details about queens and their attributes. There's no way we can get into all that and Lost in the Weeds tonight in detail on all of those things. But I will say, using solstice queens, making your splits later in the year by managing swarms up front, gathering your honey crop, treating as necessary, mitigating any kind of queen loss or colony loss post-treatment, lines you up perfectly with the timing of either fixing queen scenarios or making splits around the summer solstice. So it goes hand in hand with a greater management plan. So I love the idea. I want to consider folks to at least give it some thought.
Yeah, my take on that is I think that is also somewhat of a regional concept, and timing is so important. I've learned that last year. It really, I had quite a few post solstice queens that I ordered from both Michael Palmer and Greg, and the timing here, that time of the summer, it was during a dearth. It was a very difficult time to do splits and place queens, and I've kind of paid for that a little bit. It had nothing to do with the queen quality. I think the queens are fine. I think it was just a very difficult situation to put them in. Even though I tried to feed and everything, it was just, you got to make sure you have the proper resources. You have good,
Yep.
you have everything's lined up properly. If you drop a mated queen in a colony in April or whenever your prime honey time is, April, May, June, wherever it is in your place, in your area, they'll accept her and everything can be beautiful. But sometimes if you drop a queen in there in August or early September, it's going to be really tough on that queen. And so you got to really consider the other factors involved. And if you're able to do that, it may be at the right time of the year. I do believe that there is definitely an advantage to post solstice queens, but you got to be careful.
Yep.
It's a little more complicated, a little more difficult at certain times of the year to have success introducing queens than it is during when everything is perfect. So just kind of keep that in mind. Let's see. Melissa Foster says, discuss your frame movement and placement when splitting. I would love to do that, Melissa, but there are just so many variables. There's so many different ways to do it. Greg, do you have a Reader's Digest version, something we can talk about quick, or is that something we should discuss in an entirely different chat?
Let's circle back on that. But in short, if it so much depends on what your goal for the mother colony was to begin with. If it's like us, a lot of times, if it's not a drone colonies and their goal was to build them up and split the tar out of them, we will go through and pull 1 to 2 frames of sealed brood, 1 to 2 frames of food. Everything else gets backfilled with your drone comb or foundation. We'll go through, we could go through a yard of 48 and go through all of them. And then we can mix and match and put all those bees together. They figure it out. But we're going through and trying to be more meticulous with the pattern. So if it's 2 frames of brood, 2 frames of food, a drone comb, and a queen cell, we try to do that as many times consistently as we can, close them up, move them out. And that's kind of how we handle that.
Okay. Yappy actually created a new channel, Honey Money TV, and it's a yes, sir. He's taking a different approach there. I think it's going to be really a great channel. So go check it out if you like what you see. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe. But anyway, good question here, Yappy. He says, discuss your thoughts on how many queen cells you leave in a hive if you don't wish to make splits. Brian, why don't you address that one?
I don't know. If I'm not going to make splits, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I won't touch them. I don't cut cells out. I don't.
Brian, how about that time you and Jason are at my place and we watched that swarm leave right in front of us? Remember how many queen cells were in there?
A ton.
How many of those did Jason take home?
Oh my gosh, he had a handful.
And that was about half a handful too many.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. Yep.
Yeah. I personally, if I'm going to, say I go into a big colony, I don't have time to worry about splits, and I just, unfortunately, can't do anything with it. I'll usually leave 2. At least one, preferably 2, because then I feel like if one of them's a dud, they're going to have a queen, and usually they're not going to swarm out with just 2. They may have a swarm, but it won't be a swarm after swarm after swarm. And so if I don't plan on moving the queen away or making any manipulations to the colony, or if I don't have time to really change the situation, I'll cut out or crush all of them except for maybe 2 of the healthiest looking ones. And another thing, I'm not sure if this applies so much for swarm cells, but I've heard it, especially like if you are doing like a emergency cell type split or a walk away type split. If you go in a few days, a couple, 3 or 4 days later, and you find, say, maybe 8 emergency cells that are on the frames, I think what I've heard now, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, is that if you mash the ones that are capped first and leave the ones that are capped last, odds are that larva was younger when the emergency occurred. Would you agree with that? So those should be the healthier ones that had a chance to be fed longer. Is that a true principle? Do you believe in that, or is that not?
I don't
matter?
really. I've got a pretty, I don't want to say firm stance on this. But the argument of supersedure and emergency cells being less quality than swarm cells, what I'll say from my own experience, if it looked like a queen cell and I cut it out like a queen cell and it hatched and a queen came out, I have never seen a quality difference in any of those different varieties of queen cells. But what I will say is, I would be more concerned with not where on the frame it's located or what you think it's there for. I'm with Bruce. I leave no more than 3, preferably 2. And if for some reason I am not cutting them out and using them up and I'm just crushing them, I will pick the 2 that the bees are actually on. And when you start to look at the tip of those cells, it starts to get a real heavy texture, and they start to kind of gnaw off the bottom just and thin that tip down. Those are the ones we keep. Everything else that looks like it is just out of its league, different age, those all get smushed and crushed. Those aren't probably viable anyways, but I only leave them about 2. If you don't do that, then you'll be in the scenario that Jason and Brian seen, where there were like 8 queen cells. And luckily we were cutting them out and pulling virgins out and gave them to Jason to take home one after the other because we were right there. Had we not, what we had is, I think there was at least 2, possibly 3 castaways right after the main swarm, that you end up losing the whole box of bees when there's too many virgins in there that are all hatching at the same time, especially if they don't go through and do a Marco Polo Hunger Games kind of a thing. If they're not assassinating every future hope, sometimes they won't do that, and you'll have 5 or 6 that are hatched. And I think that's where you get most of those castaway swarms from.
True that. Brian Mater, I guess you say Mater is how you say his last name. He has a question here. He's been in the chat quite a bit, and I've heard him mention this before about spirulina in pollen patties. I believe he's a fan. What do you know about that, Greg? I don't know anything about spirulina and pollen patties. Do you have a thought on that, or an idea on that?
Look at Brian. Brian's dying. Brian, let's take it. Let's head over to Brian. Coper,
okay, Brian.
Lordstown, Ohio. Brian, what is your thoughts on spirulina
I almost looked like David Peck when that Varroa question came up the other day. He was like,
yeah, that was great.
So I literally just read an article today that I forwarded it off to Fred, forwarded to Humberto, and I put it in the chat, and it was about the benefits of, it's a blue-green algae. There was actually a study that was done, and in this study, it proved that there were, it actually helped fight deformed wing virus.
Really? Interesting.
So I do believe there are some health benefits. I know there are, the supplement that I swear by, Hive Alive, uses extracts in theirs as well. So I do truly believe there are some health benefits to using certain algae. That article that's there, if anybody wants to read it, it's not like a long read, but excellent article there. So
awesome.
We can see the health benefits. When we use the Hive Alive, there's specific things that I'm targeting, which is primarily the thymol, but there does seem to be a little extra something on there. What do you guys think about? Let's see. Let me see if I can do this real quick. What if we do? I don't know if Brian, if you can put it up there. Let's put a discount code, StreamTeam10. And you can save 10% on Hive Alive pollen patties at naturesimagefarm.com. If you're interested in the seaweeds and those kind of things, you want to give it a shot, let's save you some money tonight. Stream Team 10 has a discount code on the Nature's Image Farm website. Save yourself some money, give it a shot, and let us know what you think.
Awesome. All right. So that answers that question. Alhambra here, Orchard and Apiary, asking me, put me on the spot about Virgin Queen experience. I ordered some Virgin Queens last year, and I'll just say I got them from Corey Stevens, VSH Queens. And I think I got 12. 10 of them got mated. And about 6 or 7 of those are just really doing well right now. A couple of them kind of struggled. They were just stayed in like a nuke box all summer last year, and they're starting to explode now. I think 2 or 3 of them just kind of fizzled out, but I've had a decent experience, about like most of my queen experiences, to be honest, are attitude wise. Some of them are a little feisty, some aren't, but I think part of the reason for that is because they were mated in Ozark, which, as you all know if you watch my channel, Ozark is historically has been my spicy bee yard. And so I don't know if it was the queens or if it was the drones or a combination, but
Yeah.
they're looking pretty good right now. So my experience has been, it's my first time doing that. My experience has been pretty good, but time will tell. I think it sounds like we're in a construction zone. Brian's got those printers going, man.
Sounds like it's the beginning of the Pink Floyd song Money, where you hear the ching, Brian's out there just printing
like
it, making it happen.
Beep, beep, like we got skid steers and tractors going backwards in there.
That's the second time that we have brought up that specific album in like 4 days.
All right, Lynn Hughes. Lynn lives a little bit north of us up here. He lives just north of Ozark, up between Ozark and Ayrton, up north of me here. And he says, hey, guys, let's say you're wanting to get into pollination. Almonds is a choice. What breed would be the best in order to have lots of bees by late January 7th or by late January? Any questions? You guys want me to take that one since I've done this before?
Go ahead, Brian or Bruce.
Lynn, actually, I think, the South Alabama feral bees here that I've had have done quite well in building up for pollination. You do have to grade the colonies one by one, but I think historically your Italians or Cordovans are the ones that are less likely to brood down in the wintertime and brood up quickly in December and January if you feed them here locally. So I would say probably, because they have to be a certain strength to send them out there. They don't want weak colonies or they don't want less populated colonies showing up in California. Just because they don't have a lot of brood in January doesn't mean they're weak necessarily. They're just not the genetics to build up. So if you want to build up bees fast and keep them going strong throughout the winter here in Alabama, you just feed them like crazy in December and January. And I think typically your Carniolan, or not your Carniolans, but your Italians / maybe Cordovan type bees will absolutely lay up bricks of brood and have a lot of bees when they hit the almonds in California. So that's kind of what I would say. I think that's what most people would tell you, at least here in the South, and probably I think that's mostly what they sell. I do know that the Hawaiian queen breeder I got my queens from earlier, I think he sells to some of those type of commercial beekeepers that are going to the almonds. And that's just my understanding of it. So, but also I will tell you, Lynn, because you are here local, that the bees here, the feral bees, at least in this area, at least down here in the Dothan area, tend to stay pretty strong throughout the winter. And so if you have some feral colonies up there, I would imagine they'll be pretty strong if you build them up properly. But some of them just don't. So you got to feed them and you got to grade them, and it's a lot of work. But that's kind of what I would tell you on that. Let's see. We've got a few more super chats here. We got Mick. Thanks for the 1999 super chat. And yes, the talents comparison I think is perfect. Perfect application for that parable. There's so many ways to use that parable of the talents, and I think it works out really well with bees and with life in general. We have a Carol here, Carol McCarthy Logsdon. We are in West Central Indiana. Spring came early. Things are blooming a month early. Should I be looking for queen cells now? Last year was the end of April, early May. That's kind of someone up north. What do you guys think about that?
Absolutely keep an eye on it because, let's see, West Central Indiana. I'm thinking, I don't know if she's as far north as West Lafayette, but what I'll say is it was kind of weird on the cruise home as we come down through Gary, Indiana, and then come down through Indianapolis, that area just north, that Lafayette, West Lafayette area, they were like, there was this pocket of about 15, 20 miles that was just like out of the blue, way far advanced, or where, I mean, like all the pear trees were all just in full glorious bloom. Brian was snoring at that stage, but Brian, it was beautiful. You missed out. I was going to wake you up to show it to you, but you were sleeping so good. I'm like, I don't want to wake up that big teddy bear. Now, when we got into Indianapolis, of course, that kind of cooled off, and then going across into the state line into Ohio, it cooled off again. What I would say, Carol, is this, that in my neck of the woods, we're east central Ohio. So we're going to be maybe a hair warmer, unless you're in that warm pocket that we had seen. We're already finding some drone cells being stuck between frames, and they are already ramping drones up in a big way here. What we have also seen is some early false cups. So, like we mentioned earlier, the mode of operation typically is they brood up. They have just enough stores to start building brood. They maybe will start putting some of the fake cups on, but then we see a kind of a big boost in drones. Following the drones, we start to see them actually do something with the cups or the queen cells as they make them. So I would keep an eye on over the next couple weeks. The reason I say that is we're probably going to start grafting here in the next 2 weeks. If drones keep developing at the rate that they are, and we're already in pear bloom, we're going to be at red bud and apple before way sooner than we think. So I would definitely keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I think part of the conversation tonight has been that there is an opportunity, maybe an opportunity for some of you who are interested in getting into queen rearing to, if you develop your queen stock and you feel confident in it, maybe it would be worth it to develop that skill of making queen cells. And that might be a business opportunity for you, because you can make a lot of them if you're good at it. And you can sell them for $5, $6, $7 a pop, and I think some people probably sell them for more, but that's kind of what the going rate is around here.
This year, we hope to do that too, is leverage our strength, which is making queens, but not be worried about, I don't need to make 2,000 queens this year for sale. We're going to maybe tone that back. And if folks do want queen cells of virgins, maybe we can make that available for you. I personally am not the biggest fan of using virgins unless it's an accident or unless you're inseminating, but that's a horse of a different color.
Well, in the queen cells, the key is that you don't move them when they're too fragile, but you get them right towards the end. And so if you can time it up to where folks can pick them up
on day 14, they go home, drop them.
Yep. Or even the morning they're going to emerge if they live close. And like the ones I picked up were scheduled to hatch that afternoon theoretically. And so you can drop them in the hive. The little queen comes walking out of there within a few hours, and that's the ideal situation. So if you can get that kind of honed in and ironed down, and if you guys are really good, anybody on the chat, if you're really good at making queen cells, then there's an opportunity to not have to work. Because I think when you try to do mated queens, there's so much more involved. You've got to worry about drones, you've got to worry about timing, it's an actual. It requires way more resources, I believe. If I'm not, you got to have all the nuke boxes, the mating nukes, and it's just a lot more to it. But if you get to where you can raise some really good, nice cells, there's an opportunity there to make a little bit of money if that's something you enjoy doing.
A little teaser, Bruce, for the future is when we're talking about queens and the struggles that some of us have with virgins, the benefits of cells. I don't want anyone to think that I'm necessarily down talking the use of virgin queens. I think that I'm seeing something that when I have asked a couple of very well-respected folks in this industry, my question goes, and I'll just say it. I've asked this question: do you think it's possible that bees are racist? And what I mean by that is they're able to detect just enough nuance or variation or difference in the genetic type that for whatever reason that is setting them off, and that is affecting acceptance rate. And nearly every single time after they get done laughing, they say, you know what? I think you are right. And here's the reasons why. So I think that has a lot to do with our virgin queen failures this year, was taking these VSH Italians and trying to integrate them with the Caucasians or the Carney Caucasians. I think there was just enough. If these bees have enough difference with the length of their proboscis, I think there is something too that there may be something going on there where they have some challenges incorporating bees from a different stock inside of there. It's worth talking more about later and trying to get to the bottom of that. But that I don't want folks to think that I am talking down on the use of virgins. I'm not. I'm saying my use of them at this point, close to 1,000, has not been positive. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the beautiful things I think what's happening in the beekeeping industry right now is we have folks like you, Greg, that are working on really just a really nice quality of bees with the bees that you prefer. I know Bob Benny also runs a Caucasian line, and some really big beekeepers do. And then we also have people that are like Corey Stevens and Ashby Miller and several others that are actually trying to figure out the VSH thing. I think that's wonderful. They're doing that. They're trying to get that ironed down, and just so many people working on different aspects of it. We got folks just really studying the mites and the life cycle of mites and beetles and all the different things. And people are sharing that information, and so what's happening is more and more people are getting interested and more people are getting involved in doing their own research. And I think with people sharing the information they're seeing, it's going to help the beekeeping industry move, whether it be, the small scale beekeepers / hobbyists, sideliners, commercial, everybody's going to be able to benefit together. And hopefully beekeeping can move forward faster than it ever has before.
Absolutely.
Just because so many people are working on so many different ways to improve things. And as everybody tries their own stuff and then each other's things, people are going to figure out, hopefully it's just going to really grease the skids, so to speak, and help things move forward quickly. Last comment here, last super chat here. We've got Square Bee Honey Farms, $10. Appreciate you guys. Love these weekly bee chats. And I want to say, not just Square Bee Honey Farms, but we love you guys too out there in the community. We appreciate you being here. And that's kind of a great comment to end this thing on tonight and to kind of start to wrap this up a little bit. If you had any questions or concerns that we missed in the comments section, we apologize. They do move fast and furious. I love seeing the interaction between you guys in the comment section and between you and us. It's just amazing to see. I don't know if there could be a better community on YouTube and the beekeeping industry than what we have right here, and we appreciate you. And we had some really nice talks, discussions this past week. We were in the car, we were hanging out, the three of us, and quite a bit talking about different things and ideas for the future. And I think there's going to be some exciting things coming up. We don't know what they are yet, but we're talking about some ideas to help this thing move forward and hopefully be able to continue to grow and hopefully have a good influence and learn from each of you out there in the comments as well as from each other, and maybe help move this thing forward quite a bit. I think there's a bright future in store, not for just the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat, but for the beekeeping industry as a whole.
Bruce?
Yes, sir.
I would disclose what conversation you missed in, once we dropped you off, there was plenty of conversation.
I imagine there was.
But I had to sign an NDA. So
oh my gosh,
I cannot disclose any of the information or actions that occurred.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to know what some of those things were.
So
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
So,
all right. Why don't we start to Brian? Do you have any final thoughts for us to kind of as we start to close this thing out?
No, I'm excited here for this weather to finally break. We I think here in at least Northeast Ohio, Mother Nature teased us for a little bit, and she kind of set us straight. But we're going to be early, regardless. Our season's going to be early. I think the colonies just had a little bit too much warmth, and just kind of they got the train going already. So it slowed it up a little bit, but I'm excited to get things going. So here in the next week, I'm going to get those patties in, check some other things, just get some things straightened up. But really excited. I mean, the next month is probably going to be super exciting up here. So really looking forward to it, though.
Yeah, fun times. And
yeah,
I want to just last second, I want to say, Greg, thanks so much. Be the Lighthouse. Go get them, Bruce. Yeah, I'm trying, man. I'm really trying. And I do want to, before I turn it over to Greg to close this thing out, I just want to take a minute and say from my own YouTube channel and my own experience, I appreciate everyone for being a part of my channel, as well as the stream team. We're coming up on a pretty big landmark, something that's been a long time coming. We're about to hit 25,000 subscribers here in the next, hopefully if things continue in the next month or two. And I don't really focus as much on subscribers as some people do. I focus more on, kind of how many folks are watching and how long they're sticking around and the quality. I'm more concerned about quality of my videos and trying to share what I think will be beneficial to folks out there and what they'll enjoy. But that is a big landmark, and I really appreciate that. And so we're going to do the first stream team on my channel after I hit that 25K. We're going to have some really nice prizes I've already lined up. The goal is to have about 3 prizes that are worth several $100s a piece. And so be looking towards that. That's my goal. I've already got 3 people lined up that are going to, 2, possibly 3 people lined up that have agreed to participate. I'm not sure even exactly what the participation is going to be, but it's going to be something. And so we look forward to that, and be looking for that. And if you watch my subscriber count, you'll know how close we're getting. And so I'm excited about it. I've been working at it hard, and I think it's just the beginning, hopefully, of a awesome few years ahead. And so, Brian, I appreciate that last super chat. Brian sent me a super chat he says $2 for grafting towards 250. So yeah, I may just get there. Who knows? Anyway, so that's it. Appreciate you guys coming on tonight. Greg, bring it home for us.
Well, I thank everyone in this community. Wow, if we had the opportunity to meet you and shake your hand up in Wisconsin, up in Wausau at the Beak Meet 2024, we just want to say thank you. We want to thank all the folks involved with that for their hard work and putting those kind of things together. The stream team, we're looking forward to traveling across the country to a state conference near you to kind of bring to the table what we are a part of in this community. I think it's a beautiful way to collaborate, to fellowship, and to keep building this beekeeping industry in this kind of a way. So we're looking forward to what the future holds, not only individually, but also as the stream team. It's a busy week here on the farm. This coming week is the very first of 3 package routes, bringing bees back up here for all of our folks. I want to thank our customer base. You guys are awesome. The first route is sold out. That's going to be next week that we'll bring those back. We've got availability on the April 13th and April 27th pickups here at Nature's Image Farm. So if you're thinking about making a package bee purchase and you want to buy them here, come visit the shop, pick up some EnduraHive waxed equipment, maybe pick up a brand new Instant Vap Compact, a Guardian bee suit, Hive Alive patties, you name it, the list goes on and on and on. We've got all the supplies that you need right here. We're willing to help answer questions, get you off to a good start. For more info, check out nature'simagefarm.com. And don't forget, if you're interested in saving some money on pollen patties, use discount code STREAMTEAM10 at nature'simagefarm.com to save 10% on Hive Alive pollen patties. The future is so bright for all of us, especially when we're working together. And we can't thank you guys enough for all of your support. Bruce, Brian, it has been so much fun this past weekend. It's one of those things where we drop Bruce off at the airport and we keep driving, and you just feel like, one of the amigos is missing. And it's just, I really enjoy spending time with you guys in person. This is awesome on the inner tubes here, but to be present and to be there with folks is just another reminder of how precious the time that we do have on Earth is. And so from the bottom of all of our hearts here at the stream team, we want to thank all of you for spending your time with us here tonight live or on the replay. Next week, Wednesday, 8 o'clock on the Nature's Image Farm YouTube channel. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a special guest on talking about some really cool things, and we hope to see you there. But in the meantime, we want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.